a warm hello from the Geneva Internet Platform, which is hosting this information session on this new initiative. My name is Stephanie Borg-Psaila from the GIP, and it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Adrian Juncker and Ms. Cendresa Hoxha from the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. And also with us we have Vladimir Radunovic, whom you can see him, he's online, and Stefania Grottola, who will be facilitating the online discussion. The aim of today's session is to learn more about this new initiative, a new initiative led by the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs in cooperation with a few other organizations. And the initiative is called the Geneva Dialogue for Responsible Behaviour in Cyberspace. So what we will do today is we will learn about this initiative and especially the process surrounding it. So what will happen? How will we structure the session? So we'll give the floor to Adrian to tell us more about it, and then we will open the floor for comments and questions. For our online participants, you are also more than welcome to share your questions and feedback. A kind reminder, especially for those joining us for the first time, that in order for you to do so, you have to type the question or the comment in the space provided in the online platform. But I'm sure you're in good hands with Vladimir and Stefania. So I'll immediately give the floor to Adrian to take us through the project.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to everybody for being here and showing interest in the Geneva Dialogue for Responsible Behaviour in Cyberspace. And a warm welcome also to the colleagues attending online. And first of all, I would like to thank you for letting us using your premises, for organizing all that, including the online participation. That's great. Thank you very much. Just a small word about myself. Adrian Juncker, you just said it, but I said it not because of myself, because of where I'm working. I'm working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as Cendresa Hoxha is doing too. And we are working there at a division for security policy. The Division for Security Policy is working in or dealing with many different issues, and such as counterterrorism, arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation. It analyzes questions concerning international security and follows closely developments of the major European security actors. So this is important because that's also a little bit the perspective from which we were starting the whole initiative, the background. So we are, the division is the leading agency for cybersecurity at our ministry. And that is why we initiated the project you wish to learn more about. The main purpose of this meeting is to inform about the dialogue itself and to show you also the possibilities to contributing to the project. To this aim, and I just picked this one, we will circulate a form in an analog way, not very digital. You can indicate there your contact data, the area of interest, and also some comments. But there is also, and you received that, otherwise you wouldn't have been able to attend and to register, you received a fact sheet, and there is the email address of Cendresa Hoxha. If you have any questions, remarks, please use this email address. So in order to leave as much time as possible, and then also for questions, so let us start. And we see here the agenda. First I will give you some information about the background for the launch of the initiative, its goal and its structure. Then I will give you an overview of the timeline. We have foreseen for the different phases of the dialogue and inform about the main events that will take place. Then I will indicate the possibilities for contributions to the project. That's a very important thing for us to indicate this to you. And last but not least, we will go and we'll need to have a lot and enough time for questions and answers in the last session then. So regarding the context. Good, thank you. How did we come up with this initiative and why is it relevant? So let me first draw the context in which our idea was developed. International discussions about responsible behavior have been taken place in different formats and different areas. The most famous is the UNGGE. I'm sure you all know that the UNGGE 2016-17 was unable to reach consensus on a final report, but nevertheless the previous work of the UNGGE, namely the reports of 2010, 13 and 15, remains valid and needs to be implemented. With these three UNGGE reports, as well as the other work as the OSCE CBMs, an international framework of responsible behavior has been developed. Even though much has been achieved in these international processes, there is still a need to raise awareness, existence of this important work, and the norms need to be implemented. As you know, Switzerland has been very actively also been engaged in these discussions about international cybersecurity. We have also been member of the UNGGE 2016-2017. It has become clear during the discussions in most international fora that states alone cannot mitigate the risks for international peace and security stemming from cyberspace. What has been realized and much discussed in the last year or so is that not only states have responsibilities in cyberspace, other actors do too, and they are also very active and contribute to greater stability and security in cyberspace. What is missing, however, is a platform where all stakeholders can discuss their roles and responsibilities relating to international peace and security. So that is why we decided, in cooperation with the Geneva Internet Platform, the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, the ETH Zurich and the University of Lausanne, to launch a project through which we can broaden the discussion on responsible behavior in cyberspace and establish the idea of the Geneva Dialogue on responsible behavior in cyberspace. Our initiative will open up the discussions. We would like, about the responsible behavior in cyberspace, we will discuss with private companies, with the civil society and academic and tech communities. As well, we will discuss the interaction between the different stakeholders. This is let's say, a unique setup that does not exist in this form, and this is the added value this initiative brings about. So what is important, and I mentioned it already at the beginning, and at this stage I would like to talk about that again, is the importance. What is important is the scope of this initiative and of this dialogue. The dialogue will be about the roles and responsibilities of actors in cyberspace in the context of international peace and security. This will mean that this dialogue will focus on the context of the use of information and communication technologies by state and non-state actors for malicious purposes, threatening international peace and security. Specifically, discussions will be about what responsible behavior of all actors should look like in order to ensure peaceful, secure, and stable, a stable cyberspace. At the same time, this means that this dialogue is not about technical cybersecurity. It's on a higher flight level, let's say, because complexity is enormous. It's not focusing on cybercrime, for instance, and it's not about internet governance itself or espionage. We look at all activities that could affect international and national security, international security, yes. So, I already come to the goal of the initiative. The overall goal of this endeavor is relatively simple, but nevertheless ambitious. We wish to initiate a dialogue in order to discuss the roles and responsibility of all stakeholders, so states, private companies, and individual users relating to ICT in the context of international peace and security. We are at the moment in a first phase in which we wish to achieve the following until the end of this year, this first phase. We would like to map the roles and responsibilities of different actors in contributing to international peace, security, and stability vis-à-vis the malicious use of ICT or the cyberspace to greater security and stability inside cyberspace. Then we would like to identify potential gaps as well as good practices in this regard. And finally, we would like to forward recommendations for overcoming identified gaps. A very important thing too, and complex thing and challenge is then that we would like to also identify areas for promoting greater interaction between these actor categories. There will be quite a lot of work because there are different cultures, let's say, methodologies, viewpoints, etc., 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 you name it. So this is quite an endeavor, and we will have to work a lot and to discuss a lot about that. I would like to underline, through this dialogue, we aim to complement existing initiatives and provide additional insights on how different actors can contribute to greater stability and security in cyberspace. We do not wish to duplicate other endeavors in this regard or endeavors that talk about or discuss different subtopics, or we really want to complement, and we want to be inclusive. That's a very important thing for us. We do not have a lot of resources. Nobody has a lot of or too much resources, let's say. We want to contribute to more clarity, to more security, for a more peaceful cyberspace. So in the long term, we wish to provide a platform in Geneva through which the different stakeholders can engage and can continue the discussions about responsible behavior in cyberspace. So the initiative will look at 3 actors categories and their role in contributing to cybersecurity, and is structured in 3 work strands, respectively. You see them behind me. The work strand regarding states, the work strand regarding the industry, and the work strand regarding civil society, academic, and tech communities. As mentioned, the idea is to map the roles and responsibilities of these actors in contributing to international peace, security, and stability, and to identify potential gaps and challenges, and identify certain good practices of responsible behavior. I would like to mention here that, as I said earlier, a lot has been achieved in the first work strand, states. Already in the existing international processes, a lot of discussions happened. Therefore, this work strand is a bit different from the other 2. The aim of this dialogue is not to undermine or duplicate existing efforts. What we have in mind is that this work strand, the state's work strand, could have preliminary discussions on how implementation could be addressed. Evidently, we are following the international developments. We are awaiting the decision of the UNGA first committee meeting in October, because implementation will certainly be an issue there, and might therefore influence the focus and also the orientation of this work strand. But also for the other 2 work strands, we will of course consider the existing work as well, and try to build on that. The overall idea is to have an intense exchange among experts to put forward useful good practices and recommendations that could feed into other processes. I already mentioned that. The partner that I have mentioned also are each responsible for 1 work strand. We have UNIDIR for the states work strand. Then we have the ETH Zurich for the industry work strand, and the University of Lausanne is responsible for the work strand on behavior of civil society, academic and tech sector. So GIP, the Geneva Internet Platform, will contribute to each of these work strands with their expertise in terms of substance and also of process. Thanks to the convening power of GIP, the multi-stakeholder discussions of responsible behavior in cyberspace can be fostered. It goes without saying that for future reference, the GIP is best suited to serve as a platform for the continuation of the dialogue. Now, how will this initiative be implemented? It will consist of rounds of discussions and knowledge exchange in an online and in situ environment, supported by background research work and consultations and interviews conducted by the workstrand leads. The main event will be a 2-day workshop in November. I come back to that later. By the end of this year, we are aiming to develop a final document in which the findings of the mapping process and discussions are outlined in form of an analysis report. And hopefully we will have certain good practices and recommendations for responsible behavior in cyberspace for each actor's category. Also, we will have a compendium summarizing the research work, including methodologies and the process as a whole. The compendium will also be available in an online format and updated then regularly. Regarding the timeline for the initiative, since the discussions, we started them at the beginning of this year. We have taken quite a lot of time to establish and concretize the idea behind this dialogue in the beginning of this year. The initiative then started with a kickoff meeting of the core group composed by the FDFA, GIP, UNIDIR, ETH Zurich and University of Lausanne in early June, so not a long time ago. We are now in a preparation phase at this time, where the workstrand leads are conducting background research and will develop some basic documents that will be used for the discussions. The key document that they are working on at the moment is a framework document. This framework document should, based on this framework document, the workstrand leads will then develop the following steps. It will give an overview of the existing work and ideas of different existing processes. It will also contain initial identified gaps and good practices. This document will be elaborated on the basis of background research, but also on the basis of interactions and interview with selected experts, and it will be the basis, as I mentioned before, for the workshop in November. We will organize an introductory webinar during summer in cooperation with the Geneva Internet Platform to map key existing inputs as existing processes, but also documents and analyses. We would like to already receive their inputs from a large scale of other actors that are not directly already now in this initiative contributing. And then in autumn, we will organize a little bit more focused webinars, and there will be some discussions about the roles and responsibilities under each work strand. So it's more concrete than at this time in autumn. We do not have yet the dates when this will happen, but we'll keep you posted. The main event, as I mentioned before, is then in November, where the preliminary work done by the workstrand leads and the input received by different stakeholders will be discussed again and also be complemented. The results of the workshops will be consulted with interested stakeholders, and their suggestion will be taken into consideration as far as possible. Then in December 2018, we would like to organize an event where we will present the final document and compendium in Geneva. But once again, this is the first phase of a dialogue, of this dialogue. For 2019, further activities will be planned. One follow-up activity that we are considering is to launch next year is to have a round of discussions on international law specifically and capacity building activities. But we are not yet there. We are quite a young initiative. I mentioned before, beginning of June, first core group meeting. So we are really in a planning phase now, and are open for departure in a quite an adventure, if I may say so. So possibilities for contribution to the dialogue. The main event, as mentioned, is then the workshop in November. The participation for the workshop is on personal invitation for mixed groups of selected stakeholders. We're currently considering possible participants with all the project partners. So also there we are in a planning phase. But there will be possibilities to get involved and stay informed about the dialogue. We will establish communication channels with all interested stakeholders. There will be the email list. We have to give this around, perhaps. And then we also plan to establish a website, and we will keep you posted and inform you as soon as this website is then online. But there are also possibilities to contribute. As mentioned, we will have an introductory webinar where stakeholders can engage in discussions and introduce ideas that should be taken into consideration. The more focused webinars in autumn then will provide an opportunity to discuss specific roles and responsibilities under each work strand and hand in substantial input. The key findings of the workshops will also be made available for comments by interested stakeholders. So our message is, yes, we are working in a structure that is not huge. There are limitations in resources, personal resources, but also financial resources. There's quite a complexity we are working in. That's why also we are saying that we are working in the context of international peace and security. But the message is we are open, we are open-minded, we want to be open-minded. It's everything interconnected, and we need input. We do not know all that, really not. And that's the message. Please do not hesitate and contact us, give your inputs, try, help us to shape this complexity, to bring more simplicity into the discussion, shape it. We really need that. So very open and happy to have your feedback. As I mentioned before, the email address is on the fact sheet, and do not hesitate. So that's all from my side. At this time, Geneva, did I forget half of the stuff I was supposed to tell?
Let's just go to the Q&A. I think you have said
good. So let's go to the Q&A. Good.
Thank you, Adrian and Shantreza. So I'll pass this to Nigel. Maybe you can add the details and share, and we'll do it also for the online audience. Adrian, perhaps one question from me before I pass the floor. Can you repeat again, when is the first date for the next activity? So the webinar is on?
The webinar, actually, as I mentioned before, we are still in a planning phase. The webinar, the initial webinar, we are planning to do probably in July now, but we do not know exact date at the very moment. And then the more focused webinars on each work strand, I think it would be beginning of October probably, because in November, 1st and 2nd of November, the main event will take place, and we need the information, we need to work on that. But I cannot indicate the dates to you.
Thank you. So all of the inputs that you receive during the webinars will feed into the workshops of November. Okay, clear enough. All right, so I'd like to open the floor for questions, comments, and feedback. We'll start with the audience here, and then we'll pass to the online audience, and Stefania and Vlada will tell us what the questions are. Any initial comments? So, can we have the mic to Kasia? Can you, when you ask questions or make comments, can you introduce yourself, please? Thank you.
Katarzyna Gorgol, the European Union delegation in Geneva. Thank you very much for the invitation to this seminar and also for this initiative. It seems very interesting, and I will be happy to report to Brussels on your initiative. I have two preliminary questions. You mentioned the importance of engaging with all stakeholders and your openness and reaching out to the private sector and NGOs. I would like to ask, how are you planning to do this in practice? Perhaps it is also a question for GIP. That's my first question. The second one is about the workshop in November. You mentioned that you are, I didn't fully understand, it is in the stage of planning. Are you considering the participants at the moment or the speakers, and this relationship between by invitation only and being open at the same time? I did not fully understand that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. How to bring in all the different actors first? Yes, the idea is that we have a multi-stakeholder approach, let's say, and a holistic approach also. We need to keep the number of participants for the workshop quite low, but nevertheless, I indicate to you a number, let's say 10 persons, experts per workshop is our idea, and is also the limits of our possibilities we have. But we would like to contact persons, experts through the workstrand leads, who know a lot of people and who know and who know how to assure also this diversity in the different facets, let's say, of diversity. So the approach is also that we would like discuss each work strand not only with representatives of the work strand that is being discussed, but with different other actors. So there is a mix. This is the first thing. The workshop in November, we know the date, 1st and 2nd of November, and the participants will be, as I mentioned, will be elected, or let's say identified and contacted through the work strands. We are still about to define who could participate, and we are not yet at the point where we can take a decision on that.
Maybe I can just add something to what has been said by Adrian. The idea is to have the workshops where the preliminary work done by the strand leads that we have defined will be complemented with the experts that are there. But nevertheless, the openness can be combined with this, because all the inputs that we will receive will of course be discussed during the workshops as well. And then we will have another feedback loop after the workshops where the outcomes of the workshop will be opened for comment, and then we will integrate all the input that comes in. And basically, the final document will be relatively small. Well, we are aiming at something not too big, but we will have the compendium that will actually include all the inputs that have come in. So that will be a more really holistic overview of all the shared good practices and inputs that we'll have received. So I think we can still combine this focused approach with the workshops, but at the same time have these feedback loops around this event in November.
And if I may add, I think the documents will be available online, so throughout the whole process, online for open for comments for specific periods. So it doesn't have to be the webinars. People can contribute. The communities can contribute on the documents throughout this process. And from the GIP, we will also provide updates during the briefings on the last Tuesday of the month, so that we keep everyone informed, everyone who is here and who is participating in our briefing involved on what is happening, and maybe specific deadlines for comments, dates for the webinars. So we'll make sure to include updates about the dialogue in our briefings too. Kasia, I hope that replies to the question. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Mike, please. Yes, the name?
Sure, thank you very much. I'm Jean-Yves from Microsoft. It's a super initiative. You won't be surprised to hear me say that. I find this a very interesting initiative. I have just one question which really is in the back of my mind. So it's the Department of Foreign Affairs which is leading this initiative. Does it mean that you are in contact with other countries? How is it that it is the Department of Foreign Affairs which is doing this rather than the Department of Security or Home Affairs? It's just puzzles me.
Thank you very much. How to give a simple answer on that? Well, as I mentioned before, international peace and security as a division for security policy, that's the point of departure and the UNGG. But I think I may say Department of Foreign Affairs has more liberties also to develop, to do policy work, to organize initiatives, to give inputs, to also to have some approaches over trial and error and to go for adventures like that. This is an adventure. We do not exactly know what will happen and what will be the outcome. And that's also a little bit a question of who can do that and who is entitled to do it. And so it's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Sorry for that.
Thank you. So Nigel would like to ask.
Thank you. Sorry, Nigel Hickson, ICANN. Thank you very much for the presentation and very interesting. Just sort of one comment and one question, I suppose. You noted the work that's gone on previously in the government group of experts and OSCE. There was also work done in the initial phases, and I think in the continuing phases of the global conference on cyberspace. Back in the London conference in 2011, one of the purposes of that, and I'm not saying it's been fully realized in any sense, but the purpose of that global conference in 2011, and there was only supposed to be one, was to come up with norms of responsibility. Now, it wasn't just in peace and security, but it was in terms of actors working on cyberspace, in terms of cybersecurity as well. So there might be some material there to draw on. The question, I suppose, was on the assumption that this is very valuable work, and I think it is, and I'm sure it will be valuable work, and it might be an experiment, but I'm sure it will work. If you see, how can it be socialized? I mean, outside of Switzerland, outside of Geneva. I mean, have you thought of what sort of avenues, what conduits there are to take this work to try and influence a sort of global dialogue? To try and influence a more global dialogue on this issue, outside of Geneva.
Well, I would just like to comment on your comment about the Global Conference on Cyberspace. I mean, this is one of the initiatives that we will look at. This is, of course, we have mentioned only two here, but of course there are a lot of other work that has been done. We have also this Global Commission on Cyber Stability that has been doing a lot of work on the norms process. We have other actors that are working on this, and we are aware of that. What we like to do is to have an initial mapping of what exists and what can be used for discussion and build upon. So, but that's a very valuable comment. Thank you. And then for the question on how it can be socialized, we're considering to have a group here in Geneva at the workshops, but also that will contribute and participate in this whole dialogue that is international. So we have different countries, actors from different countries, but also industry actors that are from all over the world who will participate. And then, of course, we are always at all the conferences. We will be at the IGF in Paris. We will be at the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise in Singapore. And then we are always at the Global Conference on Cybersecurity. So we will, have panels there as well where we will initiate discussions. But basically, the first step is to have just a platform where the discussion can start, and this will be in Geneva. But of course, our aim is to have something more international on this topic.
And if I may add, I think the research will be ongoing, because even while this process is going on, I'm sure that new initiatives will crop up. So this is not any research that is done is by no means final. So it's quite ongoing. Perfect. So we have a question there, and then Richard.
Hello, I'm Sade. I'm a government affairs attorney at a wireless infrastructure trade association. I also chair a nonprofit that works on African immigrant issues. My question is about defining cyberspace in this context. I look at everything from an infrastructure standpoint. That's my focus, is broadband infrastructure. But when it comes to security related to cyberspace, I wanted to find out if like physical infrastructure, network infrastructure is part of the deliberations for this group.
Thank you for this question. Coming from a security background or international security, of course, for us, critical infrastructure is at the core of discussions, also in cyberspace. So, because that is also the vector from which, cyber attacks attain a significance for international peace and security. So, of course, that is something that will be part of the discussions, I think, in our dialogue as well.
Thanks. Richard, we can take your question.
Thanks. Richard Hill. Yeah, picking up on Nigel's question and the responses, I think also that especially in the second phase in 2019, that's something the project itself could look at. Because as we all know, for example, the GGE failed basically because of deep political disagreements between the two sides. And so after we do the stock taking and the gaps and we come up with some ideas in this project, then the project itself can look at, well, how do we get around that? How do we not fall into that trap of winding up in the same big political division? So what other ways do we have to socialize this and to bring it forward? So I would envisage that's part of the creative process, part of the experiment.
Would you like to reply to that? No.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. I think it's very important to note that that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to have a discussion about not only what can we create as new norms, that is not really the focus of this dialogue, but more of an exchange of what is there and how can we make it more clear to people that don't really understand the whole UNGGE process and these whole norms and rules that are not very, that are part of a process of negotiations and therefore quite hard to understand and to read. So we think that that's why we said it is already an added value to have a description of the roles and of what the existing work actually means and how we can actually have further recommendations on how to improve that, how to build on that. So that's very valuable. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll pose the questions from here so that we give the space to our online participants. So Stefania tells me there are a few questions. Can you say some names?
Yes, so we have two questions from the online audience. The first one is posed by Ilona, and it's about the November workshop. So it was to a certain extent already answered, but this question poses clarification about how do you plan to choose from experts associated with core organizers of the dialogue, or the list is open to anyone engaged in the preparatory process and background research? And the second one has been posed by Adriana. And will the dialogue allow cross-sectoral discussions, for instance, listening to what business and civil society think about the governments and vice versa?
Perfect. Thank you, Ilona and Adriana. Perhaps you can.
Thank you very much. How to plan and to choose? Yes. We do not yet know what we want. We want diversity. We want as much as different angles and viewpoints to be put into our discussions. So the diversity is the key element, and expertise, of course, of persons chosen for participating in the workshops. And then the second question is, if I understood right, what are the different actors expecting from each other, like the let's say private sector or then the civil society from the states, etc.? and how they will talk to each other. Yeah, of course we need that they talk to each other. That's one of the main goals that why we are launching and working on this initiative. And then also how to see and make them understand that limits of liberty, let's say, perhaps, or need for action for security of the different actors is also different, and the different actors need to take into consideration the other actors. And it's the fact, it's simple, it's very simple what I'm saying, everything is interconnected. We really, and the actors have to talk to each other, and this is one of the main goals of this initiative. And we do that because in a way that, first of all, yes, we have inclusivity, if I can pronounce it, through the process, but also in the workshop. We need, in the workshop days, we need to have personal contact, to have some extent, to have also a little bit spare time to discuss with each other, not only on an official, in official settings, but in informal ways, and come together and bring forward solutions. I think confidence is also a key issue in this field, and the will or not, but the will to want to understand the other and to limit yourself then for the liberty, let's say, or security, for the sake of security of the others and yourself is key also in the whole process. It's a little bit philosophical, but I think this must be the approach. Yes.
I just want to add, I'm not sure if you said it, but I think the question that was raised in the beginning, whether the list is open or whether it's only participants that are engaged with the work strand leads, it's not only those that are engaged with work strand leads, but it's really an open list. Of course, we count on the contacts that the work strand leads have with different stakeholders, but it's a rather open list.
Thank you. And it's regarding the second question by Adriana, it's a legitimate question, because very often in these discussions the problem is that the discussions take place in silos, and it is very difficult to overcome them. So that would be, for example, one of the aims, one of the roles of the Geneva Internet Platform, to facilitate the cross-sectoral discussions between the work streams. So do we have any? We have one more. So floor here, and then we go online, because I don't want to leave online to the last. So more questions here. Microphone. Yeah. So our colleagues from Belgium.
So my question is, you mentioned that you were going to wait for the first committee of the UN General Assembly to also get what kind of discussion happened there on the implementation of international law in cyberspace to feed into the workshop. And I was wondering, you also mentioned that you were going to be at the IGF. Are you planning on having any other? Are you planning on having any input on UN mechanisms around these issues at all? Did you want to?
I basically had the same question. I'm also from the Belgian mission here in Geneva, Sandrine Plateau. It was more on the timing that it would go in parallel, your initiative with the UNGA first committee discussion, and the fact that it might also politicize discussions here coming from there, if you understand the, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We are not really waiting on the GGE for our workshop, because this is something separate. It's not a duplication of the GGE. It doesn't follow the same structure and focus as the GGE, of course. What we wanted to underline by that is that the first work strand on state behavior is a work strand where a lot of previous work has been done, so we're kind of still following the international discussions, just not to miss anything when having the discussions in the dialogue. But basically, the scope of this work strand was supposed to be having discussions about the implementation of the existing work. So if there is a development on the international level, that would be of interest for us as well. But it does not really influence the dialogue more than that. And I hope that our dialogue will not be politicized by the GGE discussions, because this is really something, it's just an exchange. It's more about practical solutions. It's not about values or any political positioning on the structures or the formats that will be used in the GGE to discuss cybersecurity. We really want to keep it separate and have just an exchange among experts. Does that? Sorry, I can.
Yes, of course. Sorry. Do you intend on, because you're going to, of course, take into account what has been done and what is being done on the subject, but do you intend on then having an impact with the results that you're going to have, be it the compendium or the final document, on any particular UN mechanism?
On a mechanism, not really. I mean, it's not the main goal. But the goal would be, of course, to serve as a food for thought for all the discussions that are going on. So maybe some aspects that come out in the discussions of our dialogue might be useful for the UNGGE. They might solve the problems that are there, but who knows? But that's not the direct aim. It's really just something that can feed into all the processes that are going on. The main goal is not to go to the UNGGE and present a solution as such. No.
Perfect. Thank you for the question. Do we have any questions or comments here, or feedback? Any inputs? Okay, so not yet. And Stefania, we have another question online. Perfect. So the name and the question.
We have the last question from Ilona. Do you think of engaging Eastern stakeholders, government and tech giants?
Thank you for the question. We would like to have as much of diversity in every aspect, let's say at the table or in the discussions as possible. So we really definitely look forward to have a lot of people at the table, also from Eastern actors, of course, so that's also a key message. We would like to have really diversity in opinion, in origin, in every aspect. So yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Adrian, for that. Do we have any comments or questions online? No? Any final comments, any feedback from our colleagues here? No? Okay, so that was the round of questions, comments, and feedback. And I think we're on time. We had an hour earmarked for the info session. All that remains for me to do is to thank you both and to thank the Federal Department for taking on this initiative. We will follow up with the next stages and with the documents that will be open for the comments, and obviously we'll keep everyone involved. So thank you once again. Thank you our colleagues here in Geneva, and thank you our online participants for joining us.